Welcome to today's tutorial detailing my complete process on how to paint this beautiful snow scene. Let's get started. So first of all, I'm using the yellow wash to start the sky at the top. Always start at the top. Go backwards, forwards a few times. And then I'm going into the mixture of red and yellow as we get down to the horizon. And as I get close to the horizon on this occasion, I got some distant hills that are snow covered. So I'm going to leave those because this is a snow painting, so we want those left white. So that's the first combination of washes for wet in wet. Then we want the blue colour. I'm going to go for a smaller size brush at first, and once again I'm starting at the top and I'm gradually working my way down, and as I mentioned before, this is the best way, in my opinion, of your setup so that the paint for wet in wet washes can gradually work its way down. Now I'm going to leave sunburst area in this section of the painting so that we have a dramatic finish. So first of all, I'm bringing across this first sky colour down to the horizon, just coming across, sun's bursting through, clouds are coming across just a little bit at this stage. Now finally I'm going into the darkest colour so that we can show great contrast. And one thing I would say in painting transparent watercolours is that when you lay the paint down, it looks dark, very dark at times, but always remember it dries much lighter, so don't be afraid of that. It will work in your favour. It will come together as it dries. So you can already see the contrast starting to happen with that burst of sun. And now I'm going into the very dark, and with the very dark I would lay that at the bottom sections most of the time, because cloud wise you would see darker at the bottom area like that. And I'm lightly touching the paper. I'm not being heavy with it, because as much as possible, as a general rule, but all rules can be broken, I appreciate, you want to touch the paper as least as possible. If you touch it too much, it's very muddy, and you might start to damage the paper if you press too hard, etc. So keep it as light as you can. Now I've left this area purposely quite light because there'll be a tree here and a tree here, and most of the leaves have fallen, but not all of the leaves. It's early winter, late autumn, early winter, so a few leaves will be on the tree. So that should be enough for this. So right now I'm laying in the middle distance, which is some hills that are snow covered, and because in the distance I want a little bit of blue on those hills, not too much because we'll want them to fade into the background, and there will be a contrast between these hills snow covered and a couple of trees and scrubs and bushes that have some late autumn leaves upon them. So really that simple little wet in wet wash is quite sufficient, very subtle. So what we can do now is dry that off with the hairdryer. So now I have a number 4 Utrecht Sable brush, and I'm going to start with some of my brown colour for the trunks of the trees. So let's think about this, right? We got the sun really bursting through here, so the trunks are going to be darker on this side, lighter on that side. So first of all, I'm laying down some basic trunk shape. Then I can wash a brush and go on this side with some water. And then whilst that's wet, you can do it. I'm going to get the darker browny colour and go on to the dark side so that it all fuses in together but leaves this side light. Then I'm going to continue with the tree with various tree shapes, with the branches coming out here and there, all squiggly and so forth. And as we get higher into the tree, they'll get thinner and thinner, of course. It won't matter if these two are touching a little bit. We don't want them touching too much on this occasion. But just remember, in nature there aren't supposed to be straight lines. So with your trees, in the main they're crooked and so forth. I know for some trees they do have a few branches that are reasonably straight, like in the birch tree, but in the main it's shaped like so. So now that's done, we're going to do a dry brush technique for some autumn leaves that are left on the trees. So we'll use paint that is a little bit thicker, not too watered down. I'll load the brush, and to create these leaves I'll actually go like this, and you can see how they come off pretty good. And think of the shape of the tree. We don't want a cabbage shape on the tree, we want variation, so forth. And because of the time of year, we don't want too many, just enough to tell the story. So that's that one. Now this one. Dry brush technique. And then what we're going to do on this occasion is go into the lighter colour again and join in the trees. We've got some scrubby areas with a bit of autumn type coloration to those areas that are going to show quite a nice contrast between the two. And just varying the little bit to show interest rather than uniformity. That's on that side, and I come over to this side as well. Varied shapes. Once again, this is quite dry, not too much water within the mixture. Now that light area is painted, I can go into the dark again. And the sun's here, so on the right hand side of these trees I'm going to have it darker. And here I can also take some of the wash off of the brush as necessary to get the right amount that I need, because on occasions you want it to be more liquid and then other occasions less liquid. And also I can use the dry brush technique over this lighter wash to show contrast. Same again on this side. The sun's here, so darker really on the left hand side, as much as possible, just to tell the story. And that's really enough for the middle distance. Maybe just a little bit here and there darker on those trees, leaves, just a little bit, not too much. And that's our middle distance. So now we're going to paint in the river area. So we're going to start with our light colour in the distance, and then in between we're going to come into the warmer colour here and there, coming up to the side of the bank, remembering that where that will be. We can go over this area, but maybe leave a little bit on the top there where the snow has settled. So do that. Just vary it between the two colours to start with. So we've got a jagged sort of bank area here and there, coming in to show a bit of interest rather than straight lines. And then once we've laid in the light colours, we'll be going into the darker colours. And to do that, what we do is work from the bottom coming up to the top, because if you work at the top first, you say, oh, that colour's too dark. Too late, can't do much about it. So you start at the bottom and work your way up. So we've got our blue colour that we use from the sky to start with. It's always dark, much darker the closer it is to you. So continue with that, just remembering where you want to leave light. So like this, and you can always take some pigment off the brush like I did there using the tissue, you know, so you don't get too much, and then you achieve the effect that you're looking for. So now I go into the much darker colour. And always remember that as you're painting transparent watercolour, light to dark, that when you lay the paint down, you say to yourself, oh, that looks a bit too dark. But it always dries much lighter. So just bear that in mind. So at the banks, I've got it a little bit darker there, leaving it lighter as we get towards the middle of the river. Okay, and now my most dark areas, all wet in wet. So whilst it's still wet, a lot of people are sort of intimidated by wet in wet, and they say, oh, I can't control it. But if you do it this way, you will be able to control it, and with practice you'll get better and better, and you'll be really pleased with the progress that you make. So I've got varied tones here, you see, not all one mass. You've got contrast, light and dark, and darkest towards you. And now what we can do is dry that off with the hairdryer. So now that the water is completed, mostly, apart from reflections and so forth, we're going to go back into the middle distance and we're going to paint some shadow areas. So with your pre-mixed paints, and using the tissue again, if you wish to take a little bit of the paint off, you can just lay in some shadowy areas like so, and same over here, just lightly touching the paper, and then more with little variations in the snow. And you can always load your brush with water after you've laid the paint on, and then come like to the bottom of that area and show how it fuses in. So dark at the top, lighter at the bottom, where you've got the lay of the land coming into the river area like that. Same again on the other side. Load with water, go to the bottom of it, show all these little interesting areas coming down to the riverbank. And you can also, as you get closer, you can also use that dry brush technique again, you know, reasonably dry, and just drag along the paper. And with this paper, because it's a nice thick robust paper, you can achieve that dry brush technique. And it has got what we call tooth to it as well, you know, so sort of mottled surface of the paper. And see how that is achieving the effect that you want. And you can do enough to tell a story without overplaying it. As you're close, once again, you can choose to really darken an area like this. Always using the paints that you've already got mixed up, that you used when you were doing the sky, so there's harmony in terms of the colours and the hues that you're achieving. So that helps the snow. It's enough to tell the story. And now we can dry that off. Now we're going to put in some of the posts. We've already got a dark colour mixed up. And what I'm going to do on this occasion, so the sun's here, so on these posts I'm going to have it dark on this side, away from the sun, and show a little bit of light, snowy sort of colour on that side. Whilst that's wet, you can drop in little dark bits, you know, for contrast and interest. Use your tissue as necessary again to achieve what you want. And here we've got little bits of scrub and so forth. You can use a dry brush technique again, coming through here and there. You can also use some up here. Yeah, enough to tell a story, not overdone. And then on this side, and then we've got this section where it is into the water. And what I'm going to do is leave some of the white here and there to show the snow on that little platform area So I'd like to leave that little bit of snow, and then some where it meets the water there. Just like that. And then what we're going to do is some of the reflections coming into the water. Now you got choices here. You could make it a bluish type reflection, or you could use it darker, like the brownish sort of colour of the objects. But one thing to bear in mind when doing reflections, if you got something dark, the reflection's lighter. If you got an object that is light, the reflection is normally darker. That's just a little tip that I would give, and I think it served me well over the years. So these are reasonably dark, so I'm going to make my reflections of them lighter. So see that? And think of the shapes. That one's pointing that way, so reflections coming this way a little bit. I know I'm going to get some reflections as well from these trees, but just bear that in mind. Just not too much. And then as far as underneath that little platform area, we could just go into some of the lightish bluish sort of area as a shadow type situation underneath that platform, because that's a shadow as opposed to a reflection. Then we've got, on this occasion, we got some barbed wire. We can just use a little bit of bluish to start with. Broken is always good, it's more interesting. Like that. You could always drop in along that line little darker bits here and there if you wish, just not too many, just a couple. Another little post there, like that. And then continuing, we've got these trees. We're going to do, they're reasonably dark, not too dark, but reasonably, and we're going to do light reflections again. So our light brown just coming in like this, and this one, yeah, I know that comes in with a post, and you normally try to avoid a situation like that, but this is a good example of saying try to avoid that. If that post was there, it would have been better, or there it would have been better. We can always put another one here. And then what we want here now is like little branches coming out here and there, and you don't need to slavishly follow the exact lines of anything on this occasion. You can just do them like this, squiggly lines coming out here and there to indicate the trees. And you could also, if you wish, put a little bit of this here and there as well for the leaves, but not too much. Yeah, a subtle situation. Always remember, if you start light, you can then go darker if necessary. It's much more difficult to start too dark and want to lighten, because then you're getting involved in trying to lift some of the colour from the paper, which is achievable in some circumstances to some extent, but not too much. So we can just stop there before we go to finishing touches. So now we're going to paint the areas where the land meets the water, so the edge of it. And the parts that are facing you will be dark. Oh, there's the bank, so like this, and so forth. And then the other parts, like on top here, that would be light, because that's the light catching the snowy area on the top. And you can, once you've laid the light in, you can then darken up and let wet in wet appear, like so. Okay, so that shows a demarcation. And then the same on this side, like this. I don't really want to do too much in the distance because that fades away. So that can be fused in like that. Then we've got a little bit here, some here, got some here. So light first and then drop in the dark, let it fuse in together. Okay, and as I said earlier, what we can also do is decide upon where we need some more emphasis of certain detail. So we might want to darken certain areas. So for instance, trees, light from here, light on this side, darker on that side. Let's make this side a little bit darker, and so lay the paint and then water to soften it. See how that brings it more to life? Same on this one. Same as maybe a couple of the branches here and there, a little bit darker, coming up like that. Just gives them a little bit more solidity, a little bit more dimension. And you can even have a few lower branches coming out, you know, like this, you know. Yeah, just not too many, just a little bit here and there. And in the distance, we could do a little bit more dark at the bottom section of here. Once again, every now and then I'm using this tissue to dry my brush so I haven't got too much paint on it. Same again over here. And you can also, like before, use that dry brush technique like that. So it's scratching the surface, and the good thing about this paper is that it has got a rough surface, like we said before, which therefore enables you to do this dry brush technique to scratch it and show it makes it broken. So that's got more definition there now, you see. And you can then see that maybe these here, these need a little bit more definition. Still being careful to leave those little areas where there's a little bit of snow on top, things like that. Okay, and here, not too much, just enough to tell a story. And then finally, I would like to drop in a little bit of the more colourful scrubby area in the foreground, just a little bit like this. Dry technique. There, maybe a little bit over here, not too much, just enough to tell a story. Like that. And then I think we're as good as done. Thanks for watching the video today of the transparent watercolor process. Please remember to like and subscribe, and then you'll be able to see future videos.